Hello Carol. For this assessment, I've chosen to do a 15-minute video on social, emotional and behaviour disorders, SEBD, looking at the common barriers to learning for this cohort of students, why these barriers adversely affect a student's learning and wider welfare in an educational setting, and strategies that teachers can take to positively support a student affected by SEBD. Worldwide, a variety of terms are used to describe students with behaviour disorders. There is no test for SEBD. There are labels that signify a disorder. These differ in that they relate to recognised medical conditions that have a set of diagnostic criteria and recognised diagnostic tests. Loeb's notion that when no scientific classification system is available, everyone uses their own system. For this purpose of this assessment, the umbrella term SEBD will be used to classify students with these difficulties. Whatever term one chooses for this field, Ilias notes that for educators, it is fundamentally about fostering the optimal positive development of students. SEBD is taken as a descriptive term that can be applied to individuals who exhibit problems in the effective regulation of their social interactions, behaviour and/or emotional functioning. Polu defines emotional and behavioural disorders as a condition in which a child's behavioural or emotional responses are so different from those of the general accepted age-appropriate norms of children with the same ethical or cultural background as to result in significant impairment in social relationships, self-care, educational progress or classroom behaviour. In Australia, a child needs to meet the criteria under Section 4 of the Disability Discrimination Act. A disability for SEBD is defined as a disorder, illness or disease that affects a person's thought processes, perceptions of reality, emotions or judgment that results in disturbed behaviour. Social, emotional and behaviour disorders can be divided into two general categories that are characterised by externalising behaviours and internalising behaviours. Externalising behaviours constitute an acting out style that could be described as aggressive, impulsive, coercive and non-compliant. Other disorders are more accurately described as inward. Internalising behaviours are typical of an inhibited style that could be described as withdrawn, lonely, depressed and anxious. It is important for educators to look at the barriers to learning for students that are affected by SEBD. In line with global figures, around 1 in 5 Australians will experience some form of behavioural or emotional problems during childhood and adolescence. Within this context, research generally concludes that children classified as SEBD have the worst prognosis in terms of high school graduation, academic achievement, and future problems with social behaviour. And suicide is one of the leading causes of death in young children. There are many themes that have emerged through the literature which cast light on the relationship between behavioural and learning difficulties and upon the barriers to learning for this specific group of students. Emotional and behavioural self-regulation. Students with SEBD struggle in the area of emotional and behavioural self-regulation and include, among others, debilitating problems associated with the regulation of mood, depression and anxiety, conduct disorders, psychosis, eating disorders, and substance abuse disorders. When experienced to a high degree of intensity, problems such as these interfere significantly with the individual's social, emotional, and behavioural function, in turn leading to serious disruption to personal relationships, performance at school, and the individual's own sense of self-worth. A student with SEBD often have difficulty remaining on task, have problems interacting with peers and forming and maintaining friendships, or may avoid school or classes. Consequently, children with behavioural and emotional problems often have difficulty in responding appropriately to typical developmental challenges, and many underachieve in school. A student with SEBD is 3 times more likely to be suspended from school. Wagner and Camuto report that 75% of high school students with SEBD have experienced suspension or expulsion, a rate that is 4 times higher than that of their peers. Mowat observes that a barrier to learning arises from the cycle of low expectations held towards students experiencing SEBD from educators, as there is a tendency to focus upon only meeting behavioural rather than learning needs. Anderson, Kutash and Danowski note a general lack of motivation towards school and deficiencies in school-related skills such as note-taking and test-taking. These barriers interfere significantly with students with SEBD educational performance. Emotional and behavioural self-regulation. The relationship between behavioural difficulties and learning difficulties and students with emotional and behavioural difficulties have significantly greater difficulties in learning than most of their peers. Students with SEBD have difficulties in initiating and maintaining interpersonal relationships. It is recorded that students with externalizing aggressive behaviour use less verbal communication and more direct physical action to solve interpersonal problems. And as a result, those SEBD students with low social skills had more than twice as many disciplinary actions. Tsai found that 20% of students with SEBD received over 6 times as many disciplinary actions as students with other disabilities in a school year, resulting in students being sent out of the room or being suspended. Many schools continue to respond to troublesome students with punitive and exclusionary approaches, such as suspension and expulsion, which negatively affects students with behavioural problems. Being suspended is a part of the vicious cycle that compounds students' problems at school. Specifically, students who are suspended cannot participate in the academic learning opportunities at school. This situation then leads to lower academic achievement and higher probability of future misbehaviour. Anderson, Kutash and Danowski document that students with SEBD have higher arrest rates. Tsai reports that 3/5 of the youth with SEBD had been arrested at least once. Tsai found that relative to their peers, students with SEBD have lower levels of school engagement, poorer academic outcomes, and less developed academic skills and knowledge. Studies show that most students with SEBD perform 1 or more years below their academic year level. 2/3 cannot pass competency exams for their year level. They have the lowest grade point average of any group of students with disabilities. They have the highest absenteeism rate of any group of students. Jackson explained that in the classroom setting, educators tend to provide less instruction to students who are identified as high aggressors, and as a result, these students receive less attention educationally. The notion was that the behaviour of students with SEBD needed to be controlled before they could be taught, therefore placing less emphasis on their academic needs. The limited attention given to the academic needs creates a major gap in academic learning of this group, thus resulting in extremely poor outcomes such as high rates of absenteeism, low grade point averages, and a significantly high dropout rate. It is widely acknowledged that 50% of students with SEBD drop out of school before graduation, which means that students are no longer in an environment where there are educators to help them learn. Lack of motivation. Students with SEBD often lack motivation Mowat attributes this to students' perceptions of their own intelligence. They often have a belief that intelligence is a fixed commodity which is not subject to change, which is known as a helpless mindset. So when faced with a task with which they are unfamiliar and which they find challenging, they lack motivation to start or complete the task. Strategies and approaches educators can do to support students with SEBD. Literature has identified 6 major actions and approaches that have been found to project vulnerable students and support their academic and social development. These include positive behaviour interventions and supports, functional behavioural assessments, teacher-student relationships, personal qualities of educators, environment, and positive academic instruction. I explain that the management of behaviours is a central component of any program for students with SEBD. Effective behaviour management includes establishing specific and clear rules across an entire school setting. PBIS is the best evidence-based academic and behavioural practices for improving important academic and behaviour outcomes for all students. It is characterised by an emphasis on data collection, positive reinforcement techniques to shape behaviour. It is a 3-tiered support model containing primary, school-wide, secondary, which is more focused, often smaller groups, and tertiary, high-focused, individualised levels of support. At the most intensive level, a functional behaviour analysis, FBA, is completed. FBA is another empirically tested behavioural approach. FBA involves assessing the student's relationship to the environment and documents the rate and frequency of behaviour problems as well as their antecedents and consequences. FBA can help teachers determine what events cause the behaviour to occur and what other events contribute to the behaviour's increase or maintenance. Positive teacher-student relationships have been proven to influence students' academic outcomes. This view is evident in approaches to teaching and learning that stress the central importance of social interaction in the learning process. Mitchell agrees that building positive relationships with students sets the stage for effective learning to occur. These positive relationships have powerful and lasting effects on the lives of all students. Research by Schulman and Hall shows students with greater levels of support in relationships with teachers have fewer behavioural problems and better social and school adjustment and increased academic achievement. According to McIntyre and Battle, students with SEBD report that they attend class more often, behave better, and work more diligently for teachers they like, admire, and respect. Conversely, students often respond to teacher behaviour they perceive as negative through misbehaviour and poor academic performance. Several key characteristics produce favourable results regarding positive student-teacher relationships. Current research indicates that teacher attitude and expectations do impact teachers' ability to connect with students with SEBD. The lack of connection makes it difficult for teachers to develop positive student-teacher relationships with these students. In order to build a positive student-teacher relationship with students with SEBD, a teacher must first begin with self-reflection. Self-reflection includes identifying one's negative biases and attitudes, accepting the fact that change is necessary, re-educating oneself, and performing an active behavioural shift to affirm diversity and the cultures of one's students. Friend and Pope suggests self-reflection is a method teachers can use to assess what is going on in their heads about who can learn, what they can learn, and how they can be taught. Too often, general education teachers bring to the classroom their biases, prejudices, stereotypes, and beliefs about students who are different from their own backgrounds or from the school's mainstream student body. These perceptions make it difficult for teachers to have relationships with students that they do not understand or about whom they have developed preconceived beliefs. These qualities of personal warmth and supportiveness are associated with positive academic outcomes. Students tend to be most socially and academically engaged when they feel supported and respected by their teachers. Teachers that display empathy toward their students can be very powerful in enabling the positive engagement of students. Cooper notes that for students with SEBD, this means looking beyond the surface behaviour for evidence about potential sources of distress, which may be personal to the individual or a reflection of a problem in the social environment. Robbins-Etlin suggests when teachers demonstrate courteous and caring behaviour and engage in genuine dialogues with their students, students learn to trust. Robbins-Etlin note that students with SEBD need to experience cooperative relationships with their teachers and see the act of cooperation being modelled by them consistently. A flexible approach to the day's schedule to permit the teacher to handle unexpected emotional and behavioural obstacles is also necessary to increase tolerance for frustration. Teachers need to make certain that specific environmental factors are also in place. The school environment plays a large role in minimising disruptive behaviours and increasing positive student academic outcomes. Best practice strategies and interventions for teaching students with SEBD suggest that the concept of altering the environment, such as management of physical space and layout, scheduling, communication systems, classroom organisation, and the emotional. Monturo and McCann assert that teachers must set clear rules and regulations and a stable routine for students to follow. It includes classroom rules, schedules, routines, transition time, materials, student work, and physical arrangement. In order to enhance students' ultimate performances, classroom management should be consistent, predictable, and based on student needs. Sy emphasises that the goal is to make classrooms and schools more coherent, consistent, and predictable. Good and Brophy report that students from well-organised and predictable classes display fewer behavioural problems and engage in more learning-related activities than students in less predictable classes. By teaching in an ordered and structured classroom, teachers can maximise their instruction time and the level of student engagement. Academic instruction involves providing students with appropriate content knowledge and skill development through effective teaching approaches. Filter and Horner state that academic instruction is important because a mismatch between academic tasks and student abilities can lead to behavioural problems. For example, academic difficulties may promote behavioural problems that may serve as a means to escape academic work. When students are academically engaged, their on-task and behaviours increase and behavioural problems decrease. Effective academic instruction has a strong impact on student learning and behaviours. Thus, teachers should adopt effective instructional practices for students with SEBD and assure that these practices are implemented. Instructions should include the teaching of general life skills, such as social skills, to help students interact effectively and appropriately with each other and adults. Know right from wrong, follow directions and rules, and resolve conflict. In summary, evidence suggests that with early intervention or preventative efforts such as these approaches can not only support a student affected by SEBD to learn, but they can also reduce the severity of the disorder. When students feel valued, safe, and empowered, and when the school is experienced as a caring community that holds students to high academic and behavioural standards, then students are less likely to engage in undesirable behaviours and more likely to work harder and achieve more favourable outcomes.